There's misinformation, there's disinformation, there's malinformation, but news itself is not fake. News is news. News by definition, I mean, we're not super creative in journalism. News is new. It is information that the public needs to have because they didn't know it before.
From the heart of The Ohio State University on the Oval, this is Voices of Excellence from the College of Arts and Sciences, with your host, David Staley. Voices focuses on the innovative work of arts and sciences faculty and staff, with departments as wide-ranging as art, astronomy, chemistry and biochemistry, physics, emergent materials, and mathematics and languages, among many others. The college always has something exciting happening. Join us to find out what's new now.
Joining me today is Nicole Kraft, professor of journalism practice in the School of Communications at The Ohio State University College of the Arts and Sciences. She is the director of the Sports and Society Initiative at Ohio State. She's been named as the Journalism and Communication Teacher of the Year by the Scripps Howard Fund. And in 2022, she received the Ohio State Alumni Award for Distinguished Teaching. She has been named the Linda S. Putney Inspirational Teacher by the Journalism Education Association. Congratulations and welcome to Voices, Dr. Kraft.
I'm very happy to be here.
Well, you're delivering a Science Sunday talk, the title of which is Who Do You Trust? Why Journalism Still Matters. So why does journalism still matter?
Well, it matters because without it, I'm not sure that democracy survives. It was created, entrenched, I should say, within the Constitution because of the importance that a free press has in maintaining democracy, in allowing that to flourish. And I think that the road that we're going down in terms of the lack of belief in what is true is really going to compromise our ability to function as a democracy. And so journalism has long been the watchdog of the government. It's long been the way that information can be synthesized so that the public can understand it. And I think that that role has never been more important than it is today.
You had said we're debating, or maybe there's uncertainty about what is true. What explains that? That's surely not just the fault of journalism.
Well, it's certainly not the fault of journalism. I think the lack of trust in journalism, and that's one of the defining factors of the modern age of technology, is that it's very difficult to identify what exactly journalism is. So you read things and see things that appear to be in a platform where previously journalism was really the primary driver, and now I could create a newspaper in 5 minutes that would make you believe a variety of things. So the inability for us to distinguish between what is authentically driven by a desire to convey real information and allow people to make decisions based on that real information, and the desire to influence how people think and feel and believe, it's really a difficult line to identify at this point.
Is that your definition of journalism?
My definition of journalism is the pursuit of fair and accurate information in order for people to know what is important for them to conduct their lives within the structure of our society. And right now, that fairness and accuracy, we often talk about objectivity as it relates to journalism. That's not real. There's really no such thing as being objective. But you can look at a circumstance even within your own bias and look at it fairly and accurately and present it to people in a way that they are allowed to make their own decisions. That doesn't mean that all things are treated equally. So there are such things that there is no other side to, and recognizing that journalism has a place for advocacy. There's a movement now called solutions journalism where we help people come to a real understanding of how progress can be made and how change can be made, and we assist in that. These are all important ways that journalism can influence society in a meaningful way without dictating its path.
Say a little more about solutions journalism. What would that look like? What would I be reading?
Well, one of our former students works for the newspaper in Richland, and she worked on issues related to women and pregnancy, death in pregnancy, and looking at how, as a publication, they could influence health behaviors, they could influence the healthcare system in a way that would protect women in that very vulnerable space. So it wasn't a question of just looking at, hey, this data exists. It was looking at how we can improve circumstances so that people are safer and that people are healthier and that women are healthier specifically, and to advocate for and move forward with actions that would make those things become reality.
Well, I was going to use that word advocacy. So journalists as advocates?
It exists, certainly. I mean, there's a variety of roles for journalists to play, but fundamentally our goal is to make people understand what is real in a way that is consumable and understandable. And that's where our biggest challenge is coming in right now, is that what is real is being debated. And, scientists can certainly tell you how that's going for them.
So, in a sense, journalism has been fragmented. As you said, anyone can create a site or a web page that looks like a newspaper, but in fact isn't.
But even pontificating on social media makes people an expert. We have experts all over the place that have no expertise in anything, but they put themselves out as experts. I mean, if, one more person sends me something that was on TikTok or Instagram of some, health-related concern and how this is the answer because someone put it out there on a platform that is in a relatively fixed medium, that's now being identified as journalistic, even though it has no basis in fact or reality or truth.
So there can't be journalism without journalists, yes?
I mean, I think that the ethics that journalists bring to the table are significant. So we adhere to truth. The Society for Professional Journalists has a code of ethics that we follow as reporters. We act responsibly. We do no harm. We are intended to seek out truth and report it. Not everyone who disseminates information has that same adherence to seeking out truth and reporting it.
Do no harm, like the Hippocratic Oath.
Yes, exactly.
What would it mean? What does that look like for a journalist to do harm? Under what circumstances?
Conveying false information. I mean, the information that we're seeing coming out now about vaccines, presenting that unilaterally without the responsible science that goes behind it, that would be doing harm. And that's what we're seeing is people, I put in quotes, reporting information that is not benefiting the public, that in fact could be harmful to the public without any real regard for that harm that could be done. But there's a variety of ways that we can harm people. We can invade their privacy. We can, be insensitive when people go through. We're often with people at the worst moments of their lives. And if we don't treat them with the respect and care that they deserve, then that is doing harm.
In your view, what are the biggest challenges to rebuilding trust between journalists and the wider public today?
The lack of confidence that journalists have, really their primary purpose, that means anything to the public. There was a report recently out of Pew that showed that only 28% of the public actually has trust that journalists are doing the job that they're intended to do without bias and prejudice and, tilted left or right. And when we're at that low a percentage of people who believe what journalists are intended to do, then not a great deal of them believe that we're important or believe that the message that we're carrying forth is one that needs to be incorporated into their lives. And so until we can reestablish a level of trust with the public and make them engage with us in a way that says that we're all working toward the greater good, which is the sustainment of democracy and that, this evolution of society in a meaningful way, that's going to be a really difficult lift.
What are steps that journalists can take?
Transparency is a big part of it. We're focusing a lot right now on showing people how we report stories, where the information comes from. There's a distrust of, confidential sources or anonymous sources. And when you use such things, it's easy for people to dismiss that. Even though we know who those sources are when we're using them, it doesn't mean that the public believes that. So being as transparent as possible where it is reasonable to be such is a big part of what we're doing. Continuing to carry forth, truth, to carry forth the message of truth, to support that with as much evidence as we possibly can, and recognize the limitations that are in front of us and not ignore them. So it's easy to say, well, we're doing, the job that we're supposed to do, and if people don't believe us, that's their problem, or we don't present news in a way that they consume, that's their problem. No, that's our problem. And we need to really be mindful of the public that's in front of us, what their expectations are. They're fairly hedonistic in their pursuit of information. They want things that are entertaining to them, things that appeal to their own interests, sources that are aligned with their own direction of, be it politically, societally, scientifically, and recognizing that we need to be aware of what that looks like and present information that can connect with the receptors that they have open, because those receptors are fairly narrow.
The charge today is fake news. Fake news is everywhere.
Well, fake news that's not actually a real term, because there's no such thing as fake news.
This is what I wanted to know. How does a journalist respond to that, to this whole notion of fake news or this false notion of fake news?
There's misinformation, there's disinformation, there's malinformation, but news itself is not fake. News is news. News by definition, we're not super creative in journalism. News is new. It is information that the public needs to have because they didn't know it before. So that by definition is what news would be. whether we do that with an agenda, misinformation is, making mistakes or presenting information that may not be confirmed or that we have varying interpretations of. Disinformation is actual falsehood that is being disseminated. So when we say things, most recently about vaccines, that the COVID vaccine is killing children, that has a level of disinformation to it because scientific evidence does not show that. Whatever reporting goes out about that, if it is being reported in any way, that is a disinformation campaign. It's not dissimilar to propaganda. So, and then we get into malinformation, which is I'm really intending to do harm to people by disseminating information. That would be Hillary Clinton is running, that rumor of her running a sex trafficking ring in a pizza shop in New York. That was actual malinformation that resulted in that pizza shop being shot up. Thank God no one was injured in that, but easily could have been. And there's a variety of instances that we're seeing now where that is leading to people being harmed because people are really not sure what they can believe. And so they're believing a lot of things no matter what the source is.
What about AI or bot-generated stories? Where do you place this in your schema?
I'm more concerned at this point with AI-generated images and videos. It's very difficult. The level of sophistication is creating content that is very difficult to identify between real and fake. And people are willing to read a story and assume that that's real. Imagine it was always seeing is believing. So now people are seeing things and they're not looking at it with a discerning eye or with a criticism to say, is this real? Can I confirm this in another way? How many people forwarded on back in the day when it was just Photoshop, the picture of a shark swimming on a highway, that was flooded. And it's like, oh my God, look what's happening on Hurricane Katrina. And then look what's happening in Hurricane Sandy. Well, that was never happening anywhere at any time, but they believed it. And now, you're going to have celebrities saying things that they didn't say. We already have revenge porn and we have a variety of things that are being perpetrated on people. But pretty soon you're going to get, and you're getting it now actually, political figures saying things that they're not really saying either. And there is such a willingness to believe what's presented to you, regardless of what the source is, that is where we're going to get in some pretty dangerous territory.
So you teach and work with a lot of students, obviously. What is drawing students today into journalism?
It varies. We have a lot of students that want to go into sports journalism. So I would say of the students that I teach, probably 70% of them want to be in sports in some way. But the other, we have plenty. I'm working with a student right now, and he is a public records requesting machine. He has requested a variety of records from the president's office. He's requested them from the legislature. He wants truth. He wants to know where the evidence is for a variety of questions that he has. And we do, I think the pendulum swings back and forth in terms of why people view journalism as important. And right now, with the concerns that exist around the world, we could look at any number of crises that are taking place. Students do want to know. They want to know information that is truthful and that is real. And the students that we're seeing are recognizing that they have a responsibility to not only get that information, but disseminate it. The
students that are interested in sports journalism, do they have the same kinds of ethical concerns, or are there other drives, I suppose, for them?
Well, most of them are driven by a passion for sports, but the ones that come into it and really embrace the journalistic aspect of it, those people are looking at telling stories around all of the circumstances about sports. So, money, it's always been a tenet for journalists to follow the money. Well, there's never been more money in sports. And our need to really understand what the House case did to our athletic budget, which allowed us to pay student athletes directly, what NIL is doing, what inequity looks like, women's sports, men's sports. There's so many issues related to sports that I have people who come to me and say, oh, I want to report on games. I'm like, great, that doesn't exist anymore. This is what we do now. We synthesize, we interpret, we analyze, and that's really the angle that we're directing people in their sports coverage.
These students think they're going to be working for newspapers or ESPN. Where do they imagine themselves?
They're all over the board, to be honest. So they do want to work for ESPN. I had one actually that got an ESPN offer the other day. I think he might turn it down, though. He wants to be a broadcaster. They get placed at newspapers. There's a lot of more fan-driven sites. So something like 11 Warriors, Buckeye Sports Bulletin, we place students there pretty consistently. They're a very supportive supportive network for our students. And teams are another space that they get placed. So there's a lot of teams that hire journalists, a lot of social media. We have 2 students that are doing social media that I can think of right now in the NFL. So there's really so many pathways for sports. There's so much. Pretty soon we're going to start placing people, and we've worked with FanDuel. We're going to be placing people in venues like that. So FanDuel has its own TV network. It's going to be creating its own editorial content. That's where students will get placed.
Are there still school newspapers in high school? In other words, have these students done kind of student journalism? You used to call it mass media, I think, at one stage. Is that still a thing?
It does. It does exist. It's certainly less than it was before. A lot of TV stations in that high school space, so 7 through 12. But they're still doing newspapers. They still have experiences. There's still local newspapers that people are participating in. The people who come to Ohio State have a sport focus often because we are so great at sports, which is one of the reasons, we'll get to this, why the Sports and Society Initiative was created, was we were number 1 in sports. Our one-time divisional Dean Jan Bach-Steffensmeyer said we should be number 1 in all aspects of sport, and that's what we work toward. Students, I think, feel the same way. We're number 1 in sports, and so I can be number 1 in being in sports media or being in sports broadcasting, and we have the opportunities for them to really work at the highest possible level. Our student media, The Lantern, is award-winning. It is extremely influential in understanding this campus. In fact, every reporter that I know in the city of Columbus says that one of the first things they do in the morning, if they're involved covering Ohio State at all, is read The Lantern because of the material that we're able to provide. So that hyper-localism that you're seeing in college newspapers specifically, but even trickling down to high school newspapers, is such an important part of understanding the climate and understanding the society in which you live that people are coming back to it. And I think that we're going to start to see even more investment in those environments.
Well, you mentioned the Sports and Society Initiative. Tell us a little bit more about this initiative.
Well, it's the pride and joy of my time here. I work with an incredible group of people. It is through the College of Arts and Sciences. I work very closely with Dean Ryan King, who's the Social and Behavioral Sciences Dean. And as I mentioned, Jan Bach-Steffensmeyer's goal was we were number 1 in sports. We should be number 1 in sports research. So that was the area that we began. But we've really branched off into 3 main areas. That research component is huge. And Chris Canuster and Ryan Ruddy both lead those efforts at the graduate and undergraduate level, respectively. But we also host programming around key concepts related to sport. We just did one on gambling. We did an all-day session, including our athletic department, looking at problem gambling and exactly how we're going to confront that. We hosted Fox Sports here to launch the World Cup, and we had the coach of the men's national team here. We did a panel with Ross Bjork recently and some others, Beanie Wells, about the Michigan game and exactly the relevance of the Michigan game as it relates to the changing face of college football. So those are some of the areas that we approach. We really kind of are on the pulse of what's happening in sports in any given moment, and that's the program we develop. And one of our biggest areas of focus is making students career ready. So we want all of the students that want careers in sports here to know that there is a pathway to utilize our resources, our contacts, all of the excellence that we bring to the athletic table, that we can train students and provide them with the networking and the opportunities for them to go out in the world and achieve the dreams that they have related to careers in sports. So that is a big focus for us.
It strikes me that gambling is going to be a bigger and bigger issue. What are you seeing as the impact, I guess, of gambling on sports, all sports?
I'm seeing a lot of vitriol going toward our student athletes, seeing a lot of danger in people who bet beyond their means and don't understand the guardrails that are in place that they could utilize. I think gambling is a very scary space because it's such a natural part of being human, to compete. And I've been with groups of students where we'd be watching a game and 85% of the time they would be on their phones making bets as they went. So we've eliminated prop bets, which is the ability to bet on a moment or a single person's performance at a given time on college students, which I think is an important thing. It's a scary space to be in because it's just the Wild West right now, and we're not really sure how we're going to control the impulses of people as it relates to the performance of other people.
Well, I guess I was going to ask, is it too late? Is the genie out of the bottle, or can something actually be done, do you think?
You'll have to ask Mike DeWine that, because he said recently that he perhaps wished that he hadn't signed that into law. I do think that there was, and I grew up in horse racing, so I've been around gambling my entire life, but it's something that was regulated to such a degree, and then we just sort of opened all of the gates at the same time and told people to kind of go to town. So I do think more regulation is coming. I think we need much more education. The rampant nature of gambling among kids in the 7 through 12 space is really scary. And it's something that we need to be addressing at that level to make sure that they understand the ramifications of it.
Say more about that. I know next to nothing about what's happening
with the
children.
Greatest increase of gambling that we're seeing now is kids in high school. And so a lot of them, their parents are opening up. And FanDuel, I've talked to them many times about this, but their parents will open up accounts for them or they'll make bets for them without and then you don't realize how much you're winning or losing. And so you kind of get into this mode of, well, it doesn't really affect me. And then by the time it does, you have some pretty significant issues confronting you. So we really need to start this education, in the middle school space, certainly into the high school space, of understanding what gambling is, the ramifications for it, how to do it responsibly. Gambling itself is just another entertainment form that people are going to embark on. And I don't certainly see anything wrong with gambling in its existence. And as I mentioned, I've been in horse racing. It paid for my college education. But it's important that we understand what the challenges are that are going to be out there and that we support people who may not be able to support themselves at this point.
What sort of programming should we see, say, in the spring semester?
We do a lot of stuff with career focus because of the fact that people are graduating, most importantly. So we do a career readiness fair in February. We partner with people from the Indy 500, from athletic teams all around the state, actually going out to Pittsburgh, going into Michigan, Indiana, from all over. And we bring them in to help our students be better prepared to go out into the working world. So we do mock interviewing. We work with their resumes and their portfolios. And we really help them understand what it means to be in the sports space. Also, this semester, we have our data analytics conference, which is just a terrific program that we offer. Ryan Ruddy is the leader of that through our economics department, and the sports analytics club that he mentors really is the driving force behind it. We bring in industry leaders from across sports who look at understanding sports analytics, careers in sports analytics. We have students who present papers. Students actually manage all of our panels. They're the hosts for everything that we do. So those are two anchor points that we have. But sprinkled in within that, we do lunch and learns with leaders in the industry. And I know that we have Buffy Filippi coming in from Teamwork, which is one of the foremost spaces where people look for jobs in sports. And so she's going to come in and meet with our students. We are also going to be hosting events throughout the year that help students understand where they are in the career readiness sphere. So if you're a freshman, sophomore, what are the things you need to do while you're at Ohio State? What are the opportunities you can take advantage of? Then your junior, senior, and especially our seniors, we're going to bring in networking opportunities for them to meet people who have career opportunities for them that they can then pursue. So literal, one-on-one matching of people to make sure that every opportunity is available to our Buckeyes, because Buckeyes in the world want to help other Buckeyes, and we can bring them together.
Buckeye Nation. I'd like to talk about your first book, published in 2019, that might have the single greatest title for an academic book I've ever heard. Always Get the Name of the Dog, A Guide to Media Interviewing. Tell us about the book.
It is a guide to media interviewing. So I wrote it because I didn't really see anything out there. That interviewing is such a skill. People think it's a question of asking questions, but it's not. It's getting answers. And so it's really, the question doesn't mean anything. The only thing that matters is the answer. And so being able to understand what your question will look like to someone else, what does messaging look like? How do you listen? How do you hear? A lot of people think that they're hearing, but they're not really listening. And so all of those elements coming into just being able to put it in one relatively easy to understand package. I interviewed some amazing journalists that I'm lucky enough to have in my life, and just really talked about how they capture the experiences of others in order for other people to be informed and entertained. And that was the goal behind the book.
Why did you call it Always Get the Name of the Dog?
Because if you haven't asked the name of the dog, you haven't asked enough questions. And there's the introduction to the book is actually features one of our students, a former Lantern editor, Colin Binkley, who is now with the Associated Press. And he was doing an interview. He was out at a tragedy, and among the many things that happened, I believe the dog was killed. And he reported the whole story back to his editor. And then the editor goes, "But what was the name of the dog?" And he's like, "Well, I didn't get the name of the dog." He goes, "Go back and get it." And so that understanding that if you haven't thought enough about, because the goal of asking questions is to get answers for the reader. And if you're going to present information and the reader's going to have a question about it and you don't address it for them, then you have failed them. So you need to have as much information as the reader's going to be expecting and be ready to present that to them, including the name of the dog.
Well, how much then is too much information?
It's all about the reader.
I'm not going to ask you about your family, for instance.
But it's all about the reader or the listener. So if you had listeners, if we were on a podcast that was about parenting or what's it like when you have adult children, then we would be talking about my son who he's the head of design at the University of Maryland, is the football team. But we're not talking about that. And so understanding who your audience is, what their expectations are, what they need to get out of you, that's your responsibility to them, not what you want to present to them.
One of the chapters in the book is called Location Matters. Tell us about setting and its importance in an interview.
It's a difficult thing to get students to think outside their own headspace. And so a lot of them, we had a circumstance recently where we did an interview with someone who kicked one of the field goal attempts during game day and won money from Pat McAfee. And so I said to the student, where are you going to interview this person? And he said, I'm going to bring them into the Lantern newsroom and interview them here. And I said, why don't you take them out to where he kicked the football? And he was like, oh, that's right. So you have to think about where people are going to be most comfortable, where it's going to be, the noise will be limited enough that you're not overwhelmed. Like we do restaurants a lot. It's incredibly noisy in a restaurant or a coffee shop. So really understanding where you can bring awareness, comfort. I want to see where people are in their natural habitat a lot of times. So I interviewed the former police chief of Columbus, and she had a suit of armor in her office. Now, it led to a conversation about how her maiden name was Knight, and we had this whole conversation about it, but I got to see the pictures on her wall. I got to see the things that were on her desk that were not classified police things. I got to see her in her natural experiences, and that shaped my story. I remember doing a story once with a woman whose son had died very unexpectedly in his sleep at the age of 35. And, sitting down with her in her house was a much different experience than if I were to have taken her somewhere outside. There were pictures of him. There were places that he had been. I needed to experience him through her eyes. And in order to do that, I needed to be where he was. So those are the kind of things that you look for. And sometimes you want people to be uncomfortable. So I may want someone to not be as comfortable as possible. Then I'm going to pick a completely different location.
One of your book chapter titles is There Are Stupid Questions, but you don't have to ask them. And I have to ask, what is this chapter about? Again, the title is just so evocative.
I appreciate that. Again, that goes back to really envisioning what the answer will be for people. And one of the keys about interviewing is to ask the question in your own head before you ask it to someone else, and to kind of roll it around and see what the response is that you're going to get. And if you're not going to get the response that you're intending, or it's something that's going to go completely off the rails, and the example I often use when I talk to my students is I cover horse racing. And I talked to a guy at a horse race, and his horse had no business being in the race. She was not a very talented horse. It appeared on paper. And I said to him, why did you bring this horse? It doesn't appear that she's competitive at all. Well, he got furious with me and was, very hostile, as you can imagine. And I could have asked that in so many other ways. I could have said, people might say that this horse doesn't have the qualifications to be here, but you obviously feel differently. Tell me what you're seeing that other people are missing. That's a much different question. So understanding that the way that you ask things of people, that's how they're going to respond to you. Many times we ask questions that make people defensive, and we don't mean to. It's just, I want to know information, and I throw it out at you. But if I can think about what it feels like to be you, I think about this all the time. I do a lot of press conference interviews, and we did interviews the other night after the Buckeyes lost to Indiana. And there were several questions that were coming at Caleb Downs specifically that he answered very tersely. And I don't fault him for it at all. They were very aggressive questions, and I understand we have to get answers to why things happened. But understanding that this college student just lost an important game on national television that will affect their path moving forward, you need to be compassionate about that. And so I actually got down next to him and I asked my question, and my voice was much lower, and I asked him in a very personal way. And the answer that I got was very personal versus the ones that were much more rapid fire and a bit more aggressive. So it really is a question of thinking about the person in front of you and what they need to hear from you in order to be able to support the question that you're asking them.
I have to ask, how did you end up as a journalist? Did you know from an early age that you were going to be a journalist?
Yes.
Oh, you did?
I did.
Oh, okay.
I've never wanted to be anything else. When I was 8 years old, I made a newspaper. It was during the bicentennial year of 1976, and so I dressed as Bessie Ross, and I would carry it to my neighbors, and I would give them the one copy that I had of it, and I told them to read it, and then I would take it back, and I would take it to the next person. So I've always wanted to know everything. The first story that I had published was about a swimmer named Rick Carey, who in the 1984 Olympics was unhappy with his performance, and I was watching him on TV, and I thought, like, why is he so mad? I don't understand. And so I called him on the phone, and back then you could dial one area code 555-1212 and get people's phone numbers. And so I called him in Mount Kisco, New York, and I had a conversation with him about what he was thinking, and then I got that story published. For my high school newspaper, I used to interview celebrities, and I would call just agents and asked if I could speak with actors and sports celebrities. And I interviewed Maurice Cheeks of the Philadelphia 76ers for my high school newspaper in California. And then I showed up when I went to college. I went to Temple University in Philadelphia, and I knocked on the door at the Sixers front office, and I asked Harvey Pollack, who was the head of statistics, just a genius, and I said, "Can I work for you?" And he said, "Yes." So I never questioned that I would be in a space that I would be questing for information in order to share it with other people.
So it wasn't a particular journalist or something. You said 1976. I was remembering All the President's Men. I think about that time I thought, it might be cool to be a journalist. But that was because of All the President's Men.
I did see All the President's Men when I was in high school, and it didn't dissuade me. I remember reading Bob Woodward's book, The Brethren, about the Supreme Court that fascinated me, and I became obsessed with reporting on the court at that point. So there were so many pieces that went into it. I was sports editor of my high school newspaper. I have always wanted to get information. I'm ultimately a gossip, so I like to get information and make sure other people have it. That, I think, is really the driving force behind journalists.
Dorothy Kilgallen. I'm dating myself there. Tell us what's next for your research.
Well, I'll be frank, I don't do a ton of research because I'm a professor of practice. So my primary focus is service. I'm chair of athletic council, so I'm doing that for the rest of this year, very excitedly so. And I'm working on more course development for our sport-focused students. We just created a leadership in sports course that I'm very excited to offer through the college. I've been working with the leadership major there, and we're creating an internship course in sports that will also be offered through the college. So those are the primary areas. I have a book that's coming out in July that's called Storytelling Beyond the Scoreboard that I was extremely fortunate to work with John Jock Taylor, formerly of ESPN, who's actually an alum of our School of Communication or School of Journalism at the time and was a Lantern alum. And so he and I actually had breakfast together at the Cotton Bowl 2 years ago. And I said, we should do something together. Let's write a book. And he's like, okay. And that's what we did. So we're very fortunate to have such amazing alums in our space.
What's the book going to be about?
It's about this idea about sports writing is not about games anymore. And so how do you build relationships in sports coverage? How do you see where the stories live? How do you extract them from the people who have them? How do you really work with the communities, all of the communities in sports? The players, the coaches, the administrators, the officials, everyone. Sports is such a microcosm for our world that if you can understand how to cover sports well, that you can really be a terrific journalist. And so that's what we want to help people be.
Nicole Kraft, thank you.
It is such a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Voices of Excellence is produced and recorded at The Ohio State University College of Arts and Sciences Marketing and Communications Studio. More information about the podcast and our guests can be found at go.osu.edu/voices. Voices of Excellence is produced by Doug Dangler. I'm Jen Farmer.